We have a brilliant roadmap mapped out for you today. We'll be tracing an arc from grassroots societal issues in GS1 all the way up to broad governance achievements in GS5. It's a packed session, so let's get moving.
Starting things off with General Studies Paper 1 focusing on society and the environment.
Now, take a look at this phrase. During Rongali Bihu, families traditionally collect and cook 101 varieties of leafy greens, herbs, and roots. I mean, this beautifully illustrates the deep inherent connection between Assam's indigenous societies and their environment. It's essentially a zero-waste lifestyle where people depend completely on natural cycles and local biodiversity. When you inevitably get a mains question about environmental harmony, sustainable living, or indigenous food wisdom, this is the absolute perfect hyper-local example to cite. It proves that sustainability isn't just some modern corporate buzzword, it's deeply, deeply rooted in the region's cultural DNA.
Shifting gears to pressing social issues, the Barak Valley tea community has recently raised some very urgent demands to Minister Rameshwar Teli. When you're tackling GS1 questions on marginalized groups, definitely note these specific points down. The community is heavily pressing for employment generation for their educated youth, and they're demanding immediate infrastructure repairs, specifically for the long-neglected Sridbhumi Tea Garden Hostel. On top of that, they want dedicated university hostels for tea garden students at Assam University. This really highlights a critical gap in educational access and social mobility that you, as a future policymaker, are absolutely going to need to address.
Let's move right along to General Studies Paper 2, diving into governance and social justice.
Notice the major shift in municipal policy here. The Guwahati Municipal Corporation, the GMC, has completely done away with a mandatory NGO agreement that used to be required just to get a new trade license. Under the old system, startups literally had to navigate this annoying procedural hurdle just to sort out primary garbage collection documentation. Scrapping this is just a textbook example of an ease of doing business reform. By reducing that initial compliance burden, the state is directly empowering small startups and first-time entrepreneurs. It's a real game changer for local business. But, well, we need to contrast that administrative win with this frankly staggering data from the NFHS 6 survey. This chart intensely and worryingly illustrates the commercialization of maternal health care. Look at this. In urban private hospitals across the state, cesarean section births have skyrocketed to 85.1%. Compare that to just 29% in government hospitals. This isn't just a random medical statistic, this is a profound social justice issue. Experts are pointing out that this massive gap is likely driven by non-clinical factors, things like financial motivations, convenience, and a fear of litigation in the private sector. You absolutely need this data point for any answer regarding healthcare equity and regulation. Now, on a much more positive note for health and social justice, AIMS Guwahati has just introduced complex epilepsy surgeries. So, until now, patients with drug-resistant epilepsy from the Northeast had to travel to distant metropolitan centers. Think about the massive financial, emotional, and logistical burden that travel brings. By providing these highly specialized surgeries right here in Guwahati, the state is actively, tangibly bridging a critical healthcare gap. This right here is what effective public health infrastructure actually looks like in action. All right, transitioning over to General Studies Paper 3, covering economy and border security. If you are tracking economic milestones, this one is colossal. The Tata Semiconductor plant at Jagrarad is expected to actually start production within this very financial year. Discussed recently between the Chief Minister and the Union IT Minister, this 27,000 crore rupee facility is poised to completely transform Assam's industrial landscape. We're not just talking about silicon chips here. We're talking about generating thousands of tech-driven jobs and putting the entire region squarely on the global advanced manufacturing map.
Shifting focus to national security, we're tracking the upcoming Director General level border talks in Delhi between India's BSF and Bangladesh's BGB. What makes this particular meeting so significant is that it's the very first top-level border interaction since the new government took charge in Dhaka. Geopolitical shifts like this demand your close attention when studying bilateral relations.
So for your mains notes, jot down these exact critical agenda items aimed at securing that 4,096-kilometer shared border. They'll be discussing joint efforts against transborder crimes, managing illegal infiltration, and figuring out how to fence the 174.51 kilometers currently deemed not feasible due to tricky terrain like water bodies. Now, as a future administrator, you also need to synthesize expert perspectives into your analysis. Editorials are heavily pointing out that without a formal repatriation treaty between India and Bangladesh, large-scale deportation remains a bit of a mirage. It severely complicates these security efforts, rendering state pushback exercises practically ineffective and lacking legal sanctity. Keep that nuance in mind.
Let's move to General Studies Paper 4.
Everyday news gives us the absolute best case studies for ethics.
I want you to think about this critically when you analyze Guwahati's severe waterlogging issues. Who is ultimately responsible? Is it the state or is it the citizen? Every single monsoon, the city's roads just turn into rushing streams. But as civic authorities keep pointing out, the real culprit isn't just the heavy rainfall.
Look at this sequence of events. It perfectly demonstrates the core of the problem. First, the government provides dustbins and imposes fines ranging from 500 to 5,000 rupees. Next, despite this, citizens persistently continue to dump plastic bottles and household waste directly into the open drains. Then, the city's drainage network, which was never designed for solid waste, completely chokes up. And finally, severe urban flooding occurs. This is a masterclass in how a sheer lack of civic ethics and persistent public apathy can completely defeat ongoing infrastructural development. You can build the best drains in the world, but without civic responsibility, they will fail. Now contrast that public apathy with a great example of deep institutional dedication, the Government Dental College in Dibrugarh. They organized an anti-tobacco campaign that brought in actual cancer survivors to share their emotional struggles, powerfully unmasking the appeal of tobacco for the youth. That is community engagement done right.
Finally, let's wrap up with General Studies Paper 5, looking at Assam's actual governance progress.
To truly understand how Assam is progressing in education, we have to look at the PGI 2.0 report. The Performance Grading Index is basically this rigorous national framework that evaluates how well states are managing their school education systems. It relies heavily on hard data to measure things like learning outcomes, access, and equity.
And the magic number you need to remember here is 15. That is the incredible number of places Assam leaped in the national PGI rankings, successfully transitioning to a strong Pra-Chase the 3 grade. How did they pull this off? By deploying razor-sharp governance that focused heavily on digital attendance and expanding digital infrastructure. They're actively bridging the rural-urban divide and ensuring that policies don't just sit on paper, but actually translate into real-world access for students. Take a second to reflect on everything we've covered in today's explainer. We've seen how top-down policies like semiconductor plants and massive healthcare upgrades are absolutely vital. But we've also seen how grassroots civic action, or the lack of it during the Guwahati floods, can literally make or break a city. Solving these deeply interconnected challenges is exactly what your future career is going to demand. So ask yourself, how will you bridge that gap between brilliant policy intent and everyday civic action? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you continue your prep. Keep learning, stay focused, and I will see you in the next explainer.